gets a goal? Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Greetings, sisters. Well, here we are at half-time in the concluding game of double game week 26 after a rather soporific first half. Training game vibes. Something that stinks of a late concede from Arsenal and 9 DEFCONs, I think, doesn't it? But the show must go on, and after it feels like a bit of a lengthy break, actually, with midweek game week and me also doing a solo babble last Monday morning, I think it was. I'm glad to not be talking to myself, to have a beer again, and to be chatting with Sam once more, who joins me during the agony and the ecstasy that the second half ended up bring. How you doing, mate? Not been back on air since Saints' epic 4-3 win over Leicester. Hot revenge for the past day. I noticed you beat them in the Cup too. They must be sick of the sight of you now.
I certainly hope so. Yeah, it's one of those moments in football that is just all the more sweet because of what has happened in the past. I don't need to reference those matches too much, but yeah, it was nice to get one back over them. And I know these moments come quite rarely for Southampton, so I do cherish them when they come along. So yeah, it was good that it happened. It was, I think, our first 3-0 down to 4-3 comeback in our modern era. So yeah, cherish those moments, and hopefully we get a few more of them before the end of the season. But we're not here to talk about Southampton as much as I wish we were. We are, as always, who got the assist. On today's agenda, we're recording during the Wolves-Arsenal game. So as Tom mentioned, we're at half-time. It's currently still 1-0, so the clean sheet is intact. But if you notice any wincing in the background, you can probably guess what's happened in the second half. Or, on the other hand, maybe some celebrating. Maybe there's a Gabriel Thunderbastard header at the other end of the pitch. That would be lovely. But we're here, whatever happens. So I do apologise in advance for any reactions that might happen in the background. So we're going to go over, first and foremost, what happened or has been happening in double game week 26, not 16, so far, if we must. We will mention how lots of people, ourselves included, wanted a bit of variety over the Christmas period and then beyond, with the game feeling maybe a little bit stale at that point. And well, I suppose we've been given a bit more variety this week. It's just whether or not that was the variety we actually wanted. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more, have a look at the template, how it's forming now, and what it might look like in the next few game weeks, as a lot of managers will be shifting towards a wild card, and of course that blank game week in 31. Of course, we've also got to talk about Chelsea and their run coming to an end after game week 27, what our plans are with that, and what we think the FPL landscape might look like as a result of that. We'll obviously also talk about the chip situation a little bit, probably not too in-depth this week, but we'll reference it and have a look at what we're thinking of doing. And then on to form versus fixtures. As always, lots of key men, especially in the midfield, coming into consideration there. 1 week punts, captaincy, whether or not we can take on Erling Haaland again. And then we'll probably, around about that point in the pod, take a short break from our regular running order to have a look at how the Arsenal game finished up, because we'll be into the closing stages around about full time at that point. And then, of course, we'll wrap up the show with how our teams are looking going into game week 27. As I mentioned, it's Wednesday, the 18th of February. Wolves Arsenal in the background, currently half-time. How have we been getting on so far, Tom?
I'm not going to lie. I tuned out on last Saturday, and
So did I.
a bit of a disaster, mate. I feel like my house of cards has fallen down in this. Well, not completely. I definitely feel like I've lost the top few layers after this week. Definitely one of those you're kind of like, oh, who the hell's scoring? Compounded by, of course, a 50-50 going wrong. Another bloody 50-50, Sam. I knew straight away that Chow had scored when the notification came through last weekend with the Newcastle goal. And I think at that point, rightly or wrongly, I just sort of tuned out of double game week a little bit, which sounds preposterous. It sounds petty. But honestly, nothing, as I'm sure has come through on this show this year, grinds my gears more than getting 50-50 wrong. And that was just insane. I am happy with the decision, though. Thinking about last week's or the week before's 50-50 chat with decision making based on Thiago's performance, right? He should have scored 2, I think, but it's still such a savage swing. Like those 11 points could have been very, very helpful, but they're always going to be helpful. But especially this week, with a sea of rank threats ranging from João Pedro. Oh, when will it end? One more week? No, he's going to score some sort of BS penalty against us as well, isn't he? To Anton Semenyo, all managed to record hauls for their owners this week. So yeah, 11 points on the bench, bugger all on the pitch, other than the Haaland goal, which was net negative, got one off a half time as well, is now flagged. Chalobah, Rice, and triple captain Gabriel Defcons. I was over it until, as I said to you earlier, I put the screenshot of my team on the slideshow and I re-traumatized myself again seeing Chow first bench. But it is what it is. These things happen. Just very, very bloody annoying. So yeah, into this week with 30-something points. I think it's like a 60k rank drop, and I'm just very, very reliant on Gabriel now, basically, to do anything. Obviously, the Rice goal, the Rice assist, was quite helpful. I did think of you when Saka stooped to squeeze that one in through Sar's legs just because of all you've been saying about him. I mean, oh, good Lord. It just feels like it rains down. It's very similar for you, though, isn't it, in terms of scores? 34 for me. I think you've got like one more point.
Yeah, I mean, obviously stuff happening in the background, but 35 going into tonight. The only difference, I'm trying to work out where the points difference was, but Anderson in my midfield got me 5. At least he's reliable. In fact, up until today, he was the only one that really did anything good for me. Just a sea of blanks all around the team. The only goal or the only attacking return I had until tonight was Haaland, who, again, rank threats, so did me no good at all. Munoz racking up over 1 XGI, and yet conceding 3 and getting 1 point felt pretty awful. Yeah, I mean, it's just horrific. Down to 390k going into tonight. It's looking a little bit better than that now. Hopefully it will recover a bit more throughout the evening, but it's a bad game week. I think before the previous Arsenal game, I was something like game week rank of 12.8 million out of 12.9 million players, and I think you were about the same, if not slightly.
I was 13 million
somehow. Yeah,
achievement
I
a lot
don't know
there.
how this is even possible. Yeah, bad weeks for both of us. Fingers crossed that they do improve slightly in the second half, but it's not going to recover the rank. So we've got some catch up to do to recover to where we were before this week. But yeah, I don't think I was that badly set up, in all honesty. There are a couple of weak points. I wouldn't have loved Thiago going into the week, but having seen how he actually played against Arsenal, I'm pretty happy I started him. And unlike you, I didn't have the carrots of having a bench player with a double-digit haul. So at least I didn't get any decisions majorly wrong, I suppose. That's one, I guess, silver lining. But yeah, it's just not good, is it? It's really, really not good. And I might be chasing it now, unfortunately.
No, I forgot to mention I also brought in Munoz as publicised on last Monday, and I'm not surprised that you went the same way, given your voice note. Yeah, that was a crazy 5 minutes, wasn't it? When you was just, I was at the pub with a friend of the pod, James Stevenson. Happened? I know, and I was just like, oh, Burnley scored again? Oh my goodness, What is this?
It's one of those where sometimes like different apps will like bug a little bit, and it's like, oh no, it's the same goal again. But it kept happening. I was like, have they really conceded 3 times in like the space of 4 minutes? And yeah, apparently so. Yeah, What can you do? What can you do? There are still some good fixtures yet to come for him, so fingers crossed it.
Exactly. And so, what can you do? Let's move on to the kind of the main talk point this week, which is you want a variety, kind of a similar sort of feeling to, are you not entertained? Well, the irony was that we wanted freedom from the staleness and more variety. That's what we're talking about a lot. Literally like 3 weeks ago, I think. And this week, many had or were looking at a car crash week, which underlines how lesser owned picks outside maybe the engaged community are gathering traction. Like there's so many players now who are kind of, according to Live FPL, established rank threats, no matter what your position is. And I think that, it's a good time to talk about this just because we are going to be seeing a template move, predominantly because, of course, Chelsea's runs out after this weekend. I think we've, we are going to talk about chips a bit next week. I know this week most are probably looking at kind of holding firm, just because we will move into that era when, you know, likes of Enzo, maybe João Pedro, and maybe Chalobah gets moved on. But as we discussed back then, I think it was that, you know, one of the defender slots, one of the midfield slots, and maybe one of the forward slots becomes kind of quite an interesting one in terms of what people do moving forward. But I suppose first of all, Sam, I suppose it's worth just referencing that 50-50 kind of philosophical digression the other week. I mean, yeah, it's more acute for me, but for everyone who's had a bit of a tough time this time round, especially when you look at the A versus B outcomes, like people who are doing well this week, there has literally been probably one player that they've had. You know, James from Planet held on to Nico O'Reilly, for example, whereas I sold him a couple of weeks ago, and, you know, that could easily have been me. But during kind of the Christmas period, me keeping Thiago, that was really good. But, you know, other people for good reason sold him. I mean, it's very, very A versus B, very swingy, and it kind of, I do think broadly, Sam, it's a good thing the template is going to diverge. I think that's a very, very good thing. It's just, it's not good when it's diverged, but you haven't reaped the benefits, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this week was particularly painful on like on a very select few players, and I think unfortunately those exact players are also going to be painful to the non-owners again in game week 27. So I hate to say it, but I think more pain might be on the horizon for a lot of managers who haven't already committed to, let's say, in inverted commas, the correct Chelsea players or the correct Man City players. I say it like that because there are no correct ones. It's just the ones who happen to have scored points recently. However, given Man City blank pretty soon, or likely blank, we'll go into the permutations of that later, but pretty likely to blank. And then Chelsea obviously only have the Burnley game before arguably the fixtures get more difficult. Arsenal, of course, but then after that, maybe there's an argument they're not too bad. But I think most people, if you don't have them yet, you're probably not going to steam into them as easily as you would have if you were at the start of their good run back in 24, for instance. So with that in mind, I think there are a particular selection of players that I am petrified of, that I think I'm just going to keep going against. But because there are those high-owned players that I'm not going to have, it almost by definition means that I'm likely to have a few players that are differential. And if they can spike a haul or two when the more popular players don't, then I can regain the rank more quickly. So it does cut both ways, as you mentioned. It is both an opportunity and a risk. And I think if you're chasing, you probably enjoy the fact that there even is the opportunity to take that risk and regain rank in a pretty quick way. That's the way I'm trying to look at it, at least. But it does also mean it can go completely the opposite way, double as fast, if you keep betting against these well-backed players and they keep doing well. And I honestly, I think game week 27, you're in for a bit more pain, unfortunately. And I say you, I mean me. I'm
we'll take it. Oh, it's definitely going to happen. I mean, I think we'll talk about it later on. But if I owned João Pedro and I was kind of chasing rank, I would be captain João Pedro this week. Just because, not because of the underlying numbers, not because of anything else, just because the guy seems to just produce points out of his posterior at a drop of a hat, and it's obviously incredibly frustrating for people who don't own. And you're right that it feels like we're on the precipice of a change, but this week coming won't quite be it. But nonetheless, I think that there will be a lot of opportunities that open up. I say a lot of opportunities actually, but come to think of it, we discussed this morning, didn't we, with regards to a couple of other kind of pieces that we've seen around social media. And you rightly pointed out that even if you are or aren't a analytics proximal individual, Liverpool, Brentford and Bournemouth all are probably, as we've kind of flagged not very long ago, teams that are going to be heavily targeted for the Enzo replacement, for the João Pedro replacement. Obviously, we're kind of sitting pretty with Thiago, and obviously I'm kind of feeling okay with having Ekitike. Don't know why it took me 3 goes to say that, but there we go. And I think that, you know, we might. I'm kind of hoping that, you know, this diversity does continue, even though it's not worked well in my favour this week. I feel like I'm kind of, you know, just saying it's for the greater good almost. Yeah, I've had a crap week, but it's for the greater good that this sort of thing occurs. And outside of those teams, I think we are going to have some interesting sort of interesting effects when it comes to that blank week, which we will discuss a bit more next week. But I think, Sam, you did say you kind of give a quick kind of update on the chips in a minute. Principally because, I mean, if you can remove Enzo for Semenyo, if you don't own Semenyo, and the next four, so the three after the Newcastle game are Leeds, Nottingham Forest, and West Ham, which really good games for City. Like, you could kind of say, right, okay, he's 39% EO on the top 100k where I was sitting and not very long ago. I'm sure he might kind of have a lot of ambient owners the further down you go. I think his kind of raw ownership is really damn high, isn't it? So I think there may be some kind of quite interesting cases of blankitis coming across the community too, where certain players are sort of overlooked when it comes to predominantly Man City players are overlooked when it comes to it. But yeah, I mean, to some extent, there's going to be a bit of variety in terms of removing the Chelsea players. But as we run up to the blank, I guess my feeling is that it is still going to be kind of a few AB picks. So, Dango, Ryan, Sharda for the cheaper mids, maybe Sam, maybe Verts if you're looking for a more expensive player. Bumo also maybe in the mix, and then Semenyo. What do you reckon?
Yeah, pretty much. I think Semenyo's the curious case because every year when we've got blanks coming, there's always a player that people avoid because they know it's going to give them a bit of a transfer dilemma or leave them with a -4 to take as they close in on the blank. But in the meantime, he could easily pay that -4 off with interest ahead of some of the other players. But I think in this situation, there are a number of other midfielders at around or cheaper, around the same price or cheaper rather than Semenyo, that does make that quite an interesting debate. Because whilst he is a very good player, he is no longer on penalties and will have Champions League to contest with very soon, and the very likely blank. And I'll just run through that very quickly in case anyone doesn't already know what the potential for them not blanking in game week 31 is. Because Crystal Palace are already out of the FA Cup and Man City have Newcastle away from home in the FA Cup, it's not crazy to suggest that Man City might get knocked out by Newcastle. If that were to happen, then technically both of those two teams do still have a free, I think it's actually a weekend, but in that gap between 31 and 32, they've got a free slot where the FA Cup quarterfinals are played. Both of them are out of the cup. They could rearrange the fixture for later on in game week 31, like a week or two later when the FA Cup quarterfinals are being played. It's still pretty unlikely that they'll do that overall because one, Man City needs to get knocked out by Newcastle first and foremost, but then also the fixture schedulers have to kind of go against their own logic, which is to put another Premier League game during an FA Cup weekend, which they're trying to avoid doing at the moment. So I don't want to get anyone's hopes up, but it is possible that Man City and Crystal Palace play that weekend. Anyway, that aside, I think Semenyo versus Verts versus Mbeumo is actually pretty tight, even with the blank in consideration, knowing Semenyo's form right now. But then you've also got the cheaper options. You mentioned a few of them. I'd chuck into the mix Harry Wilson there as well. Rodgers, I think we both own him? I certainly do. I think we do. Yeah. So again, we maybe overlook him as a player being bought right now because we already have him. But if you look at Aston Villa's fixtures, they stand up pretty well against Bournemouth's and against Brentford's and against Liverpool's. They're definitely up there too. So Rodgers will also increase in ownership as well. So all of that to say, there's a number of picks in that 6 to 8 million bracket, maybe slightly more than 8 million for Mbeumo, that will be purchased en masse in the next few game weeks for the likes of Enzo, for the likes of Rice, who will blank. So it's about finding the one or two that you really back, I suppose. And Semenyo's ownership will make him the easy option to go with if you're secure and safe in the rank. But do remember that it might cause you a few issues down the line and cause you that -4. So it's whether or not you think that he is able to pay that off. And he might be. He genuinely might be.
It's one for the planners, isn't it? Because you've already got to look at like how many blankers in 31 you've got in your team right now. I'm sat on 5, I think. And if like I do look at, as I've kind of mentioned to you, look at buying Semenyo, my main route of getting to him, I think, wouldn't be to remove a player who's not blanking. It would probably be to remove Rice to get to swap over to Semenyo. I think that'd be the only way that I could make that work for me, because, as you say, there's going to be a kind of a downstream impact of me making the move. So that is kind of where I'm sat right now on that one. But I don't know, Sam. I do wonder whether there's much merit. Obviously, we're talking about after the North London derby. We'll see whether Tudor is able to enact a restoration for Spurs. But I don't know. I think after that, I'm kind of okay to get rid of Rice, and kind of take him on with Semenyo. But it really feels like you've got to, I guess, kind of pair one against, kind of weigh up your kind of risk and reward, don't you? There's lots of picks we'll speak about in form of this fixture, like Dango, Rayan, Verts, and things like that within the midfielder set, which I think is going to be quite heavily kind of looked at. I do think for the forwards, you are kind of probably funneling towards Ekatike, or if they're in Thiago, if you're in a 3-5-2, which a lot of people seem to be. I think that's going to be where the kind of the differentiation potential is going to be. I don't know. I just kind of think that there might be some cause as well to think about moving Rice on as well after the North London derby too.
Well, even potentially for the North London derby, a lot of people have been talking about that this week. I've been getting a lot of DMs about Rice and questions for like my personal channel too, and I know a lot of other people are as well. I think maybe that dims down a little bit after the assist tonight. I think that's a Gabriel assist, by the way, just now in the background, which might equal points, Tom. Anyway, whilst that gets confirmed for me in the chat, I think Rice could go either way. He's one of those picks that, because the minutes are so good and because he does have a few different ways of scoring points, he's got the assist threat from set pieces, he's got a bit of open play, he's got a bit of DEFCON, he's got a bit of everything, and the quarter of a clean sheet as well every time they do, and they do get a few clean sheets. All of that means that he's never a desperate player to sell, right? So it's whether or not you want to use an extra transfer early or want to wait until the last minute to collect the information. Now, I would actually vote sooner rather than later, because I think there are enough midfielders in that bracket that can get the big hauls between now and 31, given the fixtures, and also will then play in game week 31 as well. So I think it is worth chasing the upside on Rice. I don't know if I would do it ahead of Spurs, considering some of the fixtures for the players I'd be looking at. Maybe if I hadn't had Rodgers yet, I would be more tempted to go straight away, given it's Leeds at home. That's pretty good. But with Bournemouth, Ryan looks great, but we haven't seen him with Tavernier in the side yet. So maybe a week more information would be good. Brentford, I'd actually quite like to see Sharda and Dango together again to see whether one of them gets brought off early and see what the dynamic is there all of a sudden. And also it's Brighton at home. It's a decent fixture, but it's not as good as Burnley next week. And then who else are we looking at? Fulham. I don't think there's any rush to bring in Harry Wilson, for instance, ahead of Sunderland away. So I think a lot of those moves could wait a week. I don't think you need to make the moves this week. The same goes for Verts as well, by the way, away at Nottingham Forest. It's fine. It's a good fixture, but is it way better than Rice away at Spurs, when you could just collect the extra information and make the right decision next week ahead of a better set of fixtures across the board for all of those options? I think I'd probably wait, but I would also be willing to get rid of him early before we get closer to game week 31 to attack the upside, because I think we're at the point where one or two of these picks, they've got haulable fixtures, right? And if you can spike one or two of those, you're in.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Gabriel got this.
He did indeed. He did indeed. You got to say that, haven't you? On this particular show,
You do.
I think that. Yeah, as I said in the kind of the prelude to this bit, I think it's a fairly obvious, a fairly kind of not obvious. I mean, it depends on the situation. I hate saying that, but you got to say it. I do think that this weekend's a very much sort of like a roll through and see what happens. Oh,
yeah,
no.
Yeah. What they scored.
Oh dear.
We'll move on.
Yeah.
At least he got an assist.
One nightmare. No,
That's
well,
no
I suppose.
bueno.
It's no bueno. It is no. I was trying to think. I was desperately trying to think of some sort of Gomez pun, but I couldn't quite do it. And I just kind of, yeah. I think you've got to think that this week is kind of a bit of an information gathering one, and take it from there. You end up with kind of 3 or 4 weeks, and you do. There's players like Wilson, for example, who are definitely on my mind, Sam. I know to bring him back. I don't have any kind of issues with bringing him back. It's just whether I just kind of bring him back for 31 alone while they play Burnley, and kind of chance it elsewhere with a different player like a Semenyo for the short term. And I think the one particularly interesting one. I know that he's high in the effective ownership, but I did spy this week when FPL Spaceman Johnny posts what do Analytics 64 and Lead 64 do. I've noticed that none of them own Morgan Rogers, and that's because FPL Review absolutely hates Morgan Rogers because basically all of his returns are long shots from outside of the box. Got good minutes. If he's on penalties, that will quickly change, but we still don't know that. That's a pricey theory that hasn't been proven yet.
I think I'm going downhill on that theory. I talked to FPL
Abraham,
Pipple, who's a big Villa fan, and she's pretty pessimistic about his odds. So I think I'll bow to her logic on that one.
Fair enough. But again, that could be, is there scope to be picking up a player like that this week if you don't fancy Rice for whatever reason? I think that probably is, as you said, is going to be dead in the water now after kind of a return this weekend. This midweek. But maybe he's a player that if you don't own him, you should be thinking about just getting in. Really good fixtures all the way up until game week 37, I think it is, when they play Liverpool and Man City. Or Arsenal and City. I can't remember which way around it is.
Yeah, I think it's Arsenal City. But yeah, it runs out after game week 36 for sure. And I mean, I know a lot of us will be wildcarding before that, but even the wildcard window up until game week 31, it looks great for Villa. Like they've got 3 home games in there, including Leeds, Wolves away, Chelsea at home, Man United away, West Ham at home in the blank. It's pretty solid. And I mean, who knows which striker's going to be the one getting the minutes by the time we get to 31. But I tell you what, you can guarantee if he's fit, Rodgers will play in that game. So he's pretty much as secure as it gets. I'm a little bit surprised that the impact of the high minutes doesn't make him more popular among the analytics crowds. But because he's not on the penalties and he's not on all the set pieces, then I suppose it brings it back down quite heavily. But yeah, I love him. I brought him for a reason, and it's just one of those positions in your team that you just never have to think about because he will just tick over. So yeah, and he's been hitting DEFCON once or twice as well, so that's a nice little bonus.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. Just the individual games, so annoying. But so what does that work out as? It's like an 18-point loss or something ridiculous from a goal being conceded. But I mean,
yes,
yeah, it's. We'll talk about this in a little bit. But yeah, I think that it's not quite. It's not as bad as with the assist and with DEFCON last week. It's not as bad as it could have been, but it's still a bit disappointing. That's for sure.
You can still get a goal, yeah. Don't worry.
Yeah, exactly. I've never found myself more excited than in the first half. Well, I have found myself more excited, but in terms of kind of day-to-day life, I found myself more excited when Arsenal got corners. I was like, "Oh God, it's a corner! Oh, can he? Oh no, Martinelli's just headed it to no one." So in terms of the upcoming kind of schedule, Blank's coming up. We'll go into tooling up for that, and what our approach to that will be more next week. I've already mentioned my blankitis sort of thing, and kind of the chips are ready to go for most people. I know that some folk have played their wild card already, but the outlook this week from the FA Cup draw and things like that, Sam. I mean, what's that looking like briefly? As I said, we'll go into it more detail next week.
Yeah, good question. I think basically in the too long didn't read kind of vibe that we're probably going to go for this week, the FA Cup draw and the results so far basically just mean maximum chaos right now. A lot of the Premier League teams have avoided each other and are playing lower league opposition. That makes them more likely to obviously progress to the next round. The odds of having an all Premier League quarter final are higher than obviously, if like Southampton drew Wrexham, let's say in the round of 16, that then obviously that couldn't happen. So the odds of all Premier League semi-final and therefore up to 4 fixtures needing to be rearranged from game week 34 is now a bit higher. The other thing to maybe factor in is we've got our first 50-50s, as it were, not specifically 50-50, but one or the other can go through. So is it Brentford, West Ham are going up against each other? Whoever gets knocked out, their fixture will go ahead in game week 34. I think there's one other. Is it Liverpool Wolves? I think is the other one where the other one will go ahead depending on who gets knocked out. So by the time we get through the round of 16, we will start to have confirmed fixtures in 34. But in what is quite a rare turn of fates, we're quite not deep in the competition, but we're a few rounds in now, and we still don't have any confirmed fixtures in game week 34. We know a maximum of 4 could be postponed, can't be more than that, but we still don't know any of the ones that are confirmed, which is a little bit rare at this point, and it does mean that it's quite hard to plan for. We have percentage odds. We know that Arsenal are probably the most likely, given that both Arsenal and Newcastle, the teams playing each other in that week, are both still in the competition. Arsenal have, I think, Mansfield away from home, so they should go through. So they're quite likely to have their fixture rearranged, for instance. But there are no guarantees in football. They could get beaten by Mansfield, and Newcastle could get beaten by Man City, and then their game could go ahead as well. So, yeah, maximum chaos. It means that the potential upside of a bench boost in game week 33, if 4 fixtures get brought forward, could be really high. It could also mean quite a big blank in game week 34, so a free hit could be powerful there. But we just have no way of knowing just yet. The early indications are maximum chaos.
Yeah, okay. Let's hope so. I think there's definitely cause to say if you've already used your wildcard, by the way, that you really need to be stockpiling those transfers now. Just look for an excuse to roll the transfer wherever you can. This weekend probably a good starting point, but yeah, if you've got a marginal decision where you're well, maybe we know with our Munoz pick this week, we had perfectly viable playing players, and it can just as easily turn out like it did. Well, maybe not for you, but for me, I had Tarkovsky. You in that situation, I think just leave it and just be well, okay. I think it's probably better just to hold that transfer and roll it, put it in your bank, and move on with your life until next week, sort of thing.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, that would be the way I'd play it if I'd already used my wild card. You've got a lot of chaos to ride out yet, and a lot of information yet to gather before knowing which teams to be targeting ahead of what will be a tricky patch to navigate without a wild card. Not to say impossible, it can absolutely be done, but now would be the time to maybe stockpile to make sure that you are in as strong a position as possible to react to news as it comes. And by the time we get out of the end of game week 31, we should have a pretty clear picture of what the rest of the season will look like, or at least the majority of it. So yeah, I would stockpile as much as you can between now and then you can maybe use those saved transfers to redirect and reshape your team in something that might more closely resemble that of a wildcard side, or something that's just a bit more well equipped to deal with the back end of the season.
I think what's a tiny bit interesting, obviously we're a long way out and maybe more one to discuss sort of next week. I've really, if you look at kind of James's projections on FPL.team, I've really got kind of quite a lot of doublers in my side as it is, which sounds kind of ridiculous already. But yeah, it's just one of the things to kind of start to become, you should start to become sort of aware of, or kind of start to kind of keep track of what the projections are at the very least. And no, I'm not going to, I don't think there's much merit in going deep on them, because James does that incredibly well over at Planet. But I think that's kind of something to keep an eye on, regardless of whether you are wildcarding or you've already used one around the 32 point. All right, should we do anything more on the variety, Sam, except to say that there will be some variety, but maybe the picks are going to be fairly straightforward almost, or at least within a certain set?
Yeah, within a set, I think watch out for Liverpool ownership to start rising quite quickly after this week, I'd say. It might be okay in 27, but I can see Verts, Ekitike, and dare I say it, Mo Salah, potentially, on top of Van Dijk, of course, all starting to rise in ownership a little bit, become a little bit more punishing for non-owners. Same goes for Brentford, Bournemouth, of course, Aston Villa we mentioned. Chelsea will probably take a dip, but I will be interested to see how many people maybe just bench one or two of them during the Arsenal game and then have them for Villa, Newcastle, Everton, because it's not awful outside of the Arsenal game. So there's an argument to maybe keep those. But yeah, I think the general trends are Liverpool, Bournemouth, Brentford on the up. Arsenal probably hang around for another week or two before they start to dip, and Chelsea probably start to dip after this week as well.
Cool. All right. We'll come back to this next week, that's for sure. Because we'll have our transfers. We'd have had the pain from 27, and we'll have. I don't know if I don't know when we're going to have. I think James is like sometime in March. We'll actually have better ideas, but at the same time, we can kind of start to project a bit further about what we might do and talk more about this blankitis thing. Which
By the way, on that note, anyone wildcarding in game week 32 should have pretty much the full picture. We should get all of that information in the gap between 31 and 32.
Yeah, I think I'm sure it was like kind of like you don't wild. It's one of those things where there's a massive gap between 31 and 32. Don't wildcard straight away because there's going to be FA Cup, and that's when you know stuff.
Yeah.
So don't.
Well, you'll know stuff will happen because you'll know what the permutations are of the results. So like we'll have the draw and we'll know who are playing each other, but when we're even in game week 31, right? And then it will be like, oh well, if team A beats team B, then this will happen, and so on and so forth. But we just won't know specifically what we're going to be doing at that point. But I think we'll know that it will be powerful or not by that point.
Cool. All right, then. Let's move on to form versus fixtures. It's a fairly midfielder heavy one. And I think that some of these names, you can remember them because I'll be back again next Tuesday. But yeah, Semenyo, number one. As I've mentioned earlier on, I'm moving to swap him in for Rice in game week 28. I feel like in City's sort of the split striker system that they're playing, which has really sort of awful memories of me of England playing that system and not working very well. But for City, it seems to be kind of working. And two channel forwards if you're playing Foot Manager 26, and I feel like his role is pretty nailed given how it's performing. Hi Pep, thanks for watching. I'm sure you're going to screw me over now. Just but please don't. I mean that'd be very nice. Thank you. I think that he might be a good sort of long-term hold to the end of the season if you do get him in. Obviously, see what doubles land, but there is a double. There's a double due to come. And he's looking like the one at the moment. He's holding the fort for City, and he's being their sort of. He looks like being their. I don't know. Their main points getter. That sounds like an awful phrase. In Haaland's sort of semi-funk right now. But obviously, the big but. For those not playing free hit in 31 or not having a wild card to get out of a 31 dead ends, that he blanks in 31. So you've got to have a plan for that. I don't know. 153 points, I think it is this season, up 0.9. That price is going to stay as it is, and the non-pen data is good. Of course, this time at Bournemouth and City. I mean, after the Newcastle game, even including Newcastle game, to be honest, I'm scared of it this weekend. The next four are good.
Yeah, they are. I mean, the Newcastle game, honestly, I'd be fine with as well. Like, objectively, if it was just a 4-game week patch and then I was wildcarding in game week 31, I'd buy Semenyo right now because those are good enough fixtures. He's playing in the right role. But I mean, how many times have I said it even this season? Not even looking back other seasons, but the amount of Man City players not named Erling Haaland where we've had on this graphic and we've talked about at length and said they're the second coming, blah, blah, blah. And then 2 weeks later, they have one rough game or Pep tweaks the system a little bit or a player comes back from injury and then the minutes are no longer secure. We've seen it with Foden. We've seen it with Doku. We've seen it with Cherky. We've seen it with O'Reilly at times as well and a number of others over the years as well. Semenyo right now looks amazing. Amazing. And obviously, we've all got fond memories of him at Bournemouth as well. but he is no longer on penalties. He is up at around the same sort of price point and more expensive than a lot of other players who are also putting up similar underlying data. And I'll stress that because I think that gets overlooked. Semenyo's underlying data, when you remove the penalties, is not that amazing that it's like, we must buy this player. If you actually look at Verts on the chart here, he's at 9.89 non-penalty XGI for the season. Semenyo is just 1 XGI more than that so far this season. And there's 7.7 places in the gap between them in the table. But that's the difference of 1 goal across the season. And one of these two players isn't blanking in a future game week. Now, it might not seem like it right now, and I will stress test it with your side later, perhaps. But even if right now it doesn't look like you'll need to take a hit to navigate all the way through to game week 31, injuries happen, suspensions happen, and also players getting dropped happens. I'm not saying it will happen to Semenyo, but it could, because it's a Man City midfielder at the striker. But you get what I mean. Marmoush can play there as well. So with that in mind, I am very, very scared of him. I think he could haul in any one of the next 4 game weeks. But I equally kind of think that a number of the other midfielders could haul as well. And then they don't blank. By the way, there's a comment in the chat that says, I test, he's a baller. I'm the biggest fan of Semenyo in the world. I had him all year last season. I loved him earlier on this season. I've been harping on about him for years and years. Well, ever since he came to the Premier League anyway. I love him. But FPL is not a game of who is the best footballer. It's about the best points getter. And don't get me wrong, next 4 game weeks, he could get more points and significantly more points than any of the other midfielders we're going to talk about. It's possible. But it's also possible that he matches or maybe slightly gets beaten by them. And then he also blanks. So I just want to consider both avenues here. I would love to own him. I really would. I'm scared of not having him, but I think there are other players that can match him, considering they have an extra fixture. Are you muted, Tom?
Some of this comes from my own kind of perceptive, from my own situation though here, because I can do Semenyo or Verts, or I can't get Spoono, but I can do one of Semenyo or Verts and kind of also buy one of the cheaper picks that we'll talk about in a minute. So I kind of hedge it and have one of the players who's kind of quite highly owned, has 3 good fixtures, and still be all right in the blank. And again, it comes back to that planning point I mentioned earlier on. I said on Monday that, because I've got Raya, I've got kind of 1 extra slot compared to people who have got Timber and Gabriel, if that makes sense, on my bench in 31, because I can bench Raya for Dubravka pretty easily. So I've got a little bit more flexibility potentially. Yay, Raya. So he's the gift that keeps on giving, doesn't he? Yeah, so I think that kind of helps me a little bit around the jiggery pokery. The final thought on Semenyo, and before we move on, next year, if he keeps doing it, in fact, he's already done it. This guy's going to be given a massive price bump, isn't he? I mean, maybe 9 million plus. Huge perceptual discount here. City's beta point scorer that he seems to be anointed as. I don't know. I like the idea of taking the cut price premium and going with it, even though alongside with Rodgers and things like that, it's kind of a bit of a downside cover too. I think that if you are considering him, and we'll speak about this next week as well, because I probably will be kind of maybe I'll change my mind, but I think that I'm kind of quite keen to buy him in. I do think that a lot of people will be looking at the blank and just saying, well, I'm going to just accept there's a bit of pain there to be had. So I think that the gains are going to stay relatively stable. I don't know if we're going to see like a proper jump on for Semenyo. I don't know if that's going to be the case for Verts though. So Semenyo is not the only kind of semi-premium drawing attention. We'll get on the cheaper mids in the mix in a moment. But Verts, as I said on the pod last Monday, is definitely showing his true form now, despite that blank at Sunderland. Again, a very decent performance in that. Quite a lot of shots. I think he kind of, I'm sure it was like 0.5. I saw a match of the day, expected goals on target, or maybe that was FOTMob. I can't remember which one I saw that on. A couple of chances created, a big chance missed amongst that. Really like him as a pick in general, especially if you're in the 3-5-2. I think it was mentioned in the chat earlier by Martin. Which one of Verts or Ekatike would you go with if you're looking for an Liverpool, an extra Liverpool pickup? I think a lot of the time it depends on the formation almost, and at the moment, because we are kind of barreling towards, if you haven't wildcarded already, probably barreling towards a wildcard. If you have wildcard, you're probably stuck in that particular formation for a little while. I know that a lot of people are on the 3-5-2, and if you have Haaland and Thiago up front, and you kind of want a bit of the Liverpool fixtures which are coming up, which are very good, then I think that it's kind of he's kind of the de facto default pick almost, isn't he, Sam? And he's kind of we had a few kind of doubts about him. Well, you certainly did for good reason about his kind of underlying data kind of in the past. But growing into his role in the Premier League now seems to have, I suppose, made that step into adjustment and showing what he's all about, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I never doubted him as a player for what it's worth. It's just his data to begin with at the start of the season wasn't all that great. He was maybe getting a little bit more bullied in games and he wasn't matching up to the physicality of the league. He's come out in interviews and said as much as well. But I think he's really growing into the role. The data is ticking up quite quickly now. And the nice thing about Verts is when he returns, he gets bonus as well. So those 5-point goals are more like 6 or 7-point goals. Those assists are more like 4 or 5-point assists, and it just all mixes together to make quite a good, healthy FPL pick there. He's a little bit more expensive than Semenyo, but I think the fixtures are just as good, and he plays in game week 31. I really like him. I think he's where my eye is naturally taking me as the Rice replacement or the Enzo replacement in game week 28 right now. And I do think having a bit of that Liverpool coverage will be handy given the fixtures that they have. And I think Verts is a pretty reasonable route into that. For what it's worth, if I had Ekatike, I wouldn't be doing the swap. I would hold firm with Ekatike. And if you had the money, I'd prefer Salah. But he's a lot cheaper and he's got decent data and he's playing really, really well at the moment. So, yeah, I'm all in on Verts as it stands, but a week is a long time. So who knows what will happen by the time we get to game of 28.
Yeah, I suppose there's an element of like, if you do own Ekatike already, which is not an insignificant number, like, do you add Verts to that or do you hedge it outside of it? I think that's an interesting question that I will be kind of looking at, because like in my case, I've got probably an option between, do I go with Verts or do I go with Semenyo? Do I attack that kind of Semenyo pick or do I kind of go against it? And I think that I can see both kind of options having a lot of merit to them. And I take up all what you said earlier about Semenyo and kind of all the different sort of ways in which it might not manifest. And Liverpool do have a few good fixtures kind of under their belt. And it might be the case that you look at the Forest fixture, you also bear in mind that they do have a 31 and think, well, okay, I'm going to get an extra fixture out of this guy. And it might be that I end up kind of just keeping a hold of him for a little while. If you don't have Ekatike, I do think that kind of going with Verts and thinking, well, to the eye, they've got a very good relationship. Verts online data, as you mentioned earlier, is pretty good. And I really like the pick. And I was very keen on the pick. I've already owned Verts this season. I kind of did the Havertz and got him straight away. I'm with Salah. I just don't think he's worth the money. Fundamentally, unfortunately,
doesn't matter if Haaland's injured.
Yeah,
but he's in training. I will say he's in training today, so he won't be.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I just don't think he's worth the money, honestly. But
if money doesn't matter though, and Haaland was injured, then I think it's a captaincy option.
But I suppose if you wanted to make the swap though, in that scenario, I mean, if you're wild carding, sure, and you were just doing that, then fine. So no, I just maybe there's kind of a bit of a price quality heuristic there, where you're like, well, Salah's worth a load of money. He's got a good kind of long term record, sure. No, I may be tempted to captain Semenyo if Haaland was out of the picture, and think that he and Marmoush could make something work together.
Only if
Maybe that's
Semenyo
just
was
me.
on. I'd have
I mean,
Salah a million times over Semenyo if I didn't have any confirmation Semenyo was on penalties.
yeah,
Like,
fair.
I think we're forgetting the power of penalties here as well. Like, Salah's on set pieces from one side, he's got penalties. Sure,
Yeah.
he's been a bit iffy this season, but he's now getting the minutes again. And remember, he was dropped for a while, so that will play into the fact that he hasn't got as many returns. I was seriously considering, if Haaland was out for a couple of weeks, doing a double swap to Salah and Ekitike instead of Ertz, and I would have captained him quite a few weeks in a row, I think. But Haaland's back, so I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I think it'd be all right. I mean, it's all hypothetical, isn't it? All right, on to the cheaper boys. Dango and Ryan, I think, are probably maybe the two, Sam. I think you mentioned Harry Wilson earlier on. Spoken a lot about him recently, so I think I'm going to maybe leave that one be. Get good minutes, though, Wilson. Let's just hope that his minutes don't get slightly siphoned away by Oscar Bob. But yeah, Dango and Ryan, both really fun picks, aren't they? I mean, Dango's more of a known quality with his haulability, whereas Ryan's more of an unknown quantity, and as we said a couple of weeks ago, perhaps benefiting from that. Teams are unfamiliar with him, how to stop him, and a header too for his goal last weekend. On Football Manager, again, I keep going back to it. I'm sorry, I end up speaking to a very small amount of people, but a player who is a winger but has jumping reach and strength. That is absolute gold, honestly, because normally wingers are just kind of jinking little things with no strength and nothing in the air.
The Ryan Frasers of the world.
Yeah, if you Southampton legend Brian Fraser, let's just get that
Yeah.
right. But yeah,
And
I mean,
Bournemouth legend, more importantly, in this case.
no. So, no, his contributions to Bournemouth, to South Coast rivals, are nothing compared to your contributions to Southampton. But yeah, and this is actually quite an interesting one because I mean they're very similar price, so 5.8, 5.5. Both teams come to understat 6th and 7th respectively. That's Bournemouth. So I keep forgetting which one Dango plays for now, but it's Brentford he plays for now. And Bournemouth 6th and 7th respectively with Team XG. Brentford are still in the cup after beating Macclesfield. Got a tie with West Ham coming, so that might be something to consider. But the fixtures for both are great, and they're really good sort of dead end fodder. They've 3 home games in 5 for Bournemouth in particular here, although it's worth noting that the Cherries, according to Understat, perform better away. Bournemouth next 5 is West Ham, the Sunderland's, Brentford, both of them at home, Burnley away, the Man United at home. For Brentford, it is Brighton at home, Burnley away, Bournemouth away, so they both play each other, Wolves at home and Leeds away. So there's a few slightly better fixtures potentially on the roster for Brentford, but I mean, either of them pairs really well. So if you're looking to, like me, potentially move on Rice and Enzo, both compare really well with Semenyo or Wirtz. But it's cool between the two fixtures, and I've got Thiago already, so it might again be a case of maybe I'll just kind of, if I go with Semenyo, I might just kind of hedge it and go with Ryan. I don't know, we'll see. As to note that Sade will be in probably every FPL review Vassal side. The robot is absolutely obsessed with him, but I don't know. I think there's maybe a bit more value in Dango as it is.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think we probably need a bit of a meta discussion on value if you're about to wildcard. Like, it doesn't really matter. If you can afford either of them and you've got no other way of using the money, then pick the one you prefer. If that's still Dango, then fair enough. But if Sharda is affordable, you're not using the money anywhere else, and you prefer him, then go with Sharda. Like, there's no reason not to if the value isn't a problem. If you're wildcarding in game week 32, that is. So, yeah, I mean, I haven't really checked. I don't know which one's being preferred out of the two. I'd assume that Dango is fitting in quite comfortably to a number of plans because he is cheaper and it would help afford other players elsewhere. As you mentioned, the combination of maybe Rice and Enzo to a more expensive and a cheaper one might only work with Dango in a lot of situations. But I wouldn't completely disregard Sharda just because some other website is saying he's a pick we should consider. Like, you shouldn't ignore players just because they're getting picked by other other algorithms or whatever, you can also use your eyes and still come to the same conclusion. However, I don't think there is much between the two, and there is a few other bits I would like to use the money on. So with that in mind, I prefer Dango myself, but it was just more of a cautionary word of warning to anyone out there who's just going for the cheaper one for the sake of it when there's nothing else that they want to spend the money on. Sure. I personally would like one more week of information on both the Bournemouth and the Brentford players, just to see what the minutes look like for both of those options, because we just don't yet know what the impact of returning players is going to necessarily have on either of them. I think Dango we've got a bit more confidence in, but I really like what I've seen from Ryan so far. He seems like a really exciting player to have a bit of a 4 or 5 week punt on. So I could easily be tempted the other way with one more week of information in the bag.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I'm very kind of. It's almost like I don't know the intricacies of Brentford rotation well enough to know that if Dango is particularly nailed, where it feels like the lad Ryan has been brought in as a Semenyo replacement. I'm sure he's just kind of fairly good for starts at the very least. We've got what 2 full games to judge it on, and but that can be both absolutely terrible for FPL managers and also be an absolute godsend for FPL managers if you do have a player like that who does come in and completely upsets the apple cart. And I'm quite tempted to have a look at it, honestly, with Ryan. I'm definitely going to give it this weekend. Obviously, the West Ham game is what will come. But then there's 2 decent home games against Sunderland and Brentford for him, and that could be all right. But I do miss out on the Burnley game for the double Brentfords. Yeah, it's one of those where I'll come back to it. I'll definitely come back to it. And I completely appreciate what you're saying there. Up front, again, reflecting what we were saying earlier about how the template may switch. There's Thiago, there's Kiki's been Ekatike, and most will probably own Thiago. But I think those coming back from JP will probably want to go in, and don't want to turn this into a discussion on this, but in hindsight, maybe moving one of Ekatike or Thiago for me to JP may have been, that would have set me in good stead, to be honest. But it's very, very hindsight. The fixtures are very good for Brentford. Great job by Keith Andrews, which I think has meant that those early season predictions that Brentford have wet the bed with appointing him have been hastily scrubbed from the internet. But yeah, I mean, plays Burnley, Wolves, and Leeds in the next 5. I mean, that's yeah, I mean, we've said quite a lot about Thiago, haven't we? I suppose Ekatike, Sam, is one of those in your 3-5-2. You're just kind of hoping that you want a piece of Liverpool, and it kind of feels like that draws you immediately back to the man with the disgust inverts.
Yeah, I think at this point, given I've only got one free transfer, it's unlikely I'm going to get back to Ekatike unless Haaland was out for whatever reason, which looks very unlikely now. 2-2 Wolves, by the way. Interesting last minute. But yeah, Thiago seems like a player that's going to be very, very highly owned by the time definitely by game week 28, probably starting off in game week 27, although seems like a pretty obvious João Pedro replacement if you do wait for after game week 27 out of the way. Ekatike's ownership will probably bounce a little bit, but I imagine because of the lack of transfers for a lot of people and the fact that it's a structural issue of 3-5-2 for a lot of managers as well, that his ownership might comparatively stay a bit lower. And I think Verts is arguably in the same league in terms of the potential upside. So yeah, I think people will more naturally go towards Verts. So yeah, I would not be surprised at all to see Haaland times Thiago times a cheap sort of bench forward as the meta for the next few game weeks after João Pedro's Burnley fixtures out of the way, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, the final one, James Hill, the ultimate combination piece assist this week, and just a very helpful kind of pickup. But I suppose it was oddly kind of between him or maybe Virgil as a premium alternative. You're looking for a defender, right?
Yeah, I think again, if you're in the market for someone a bit cheaper to help afford something in midfielder up front, then yeah, he makes a lot of sense. I mean, he's hitting DEFCON very, very comfortably at the moment and beating Senesi for it most weeks. And although Bournemouth aren't a great defence, I wouldn't be surprised to see them keep a clean sheet or two between now and 31. And he's got a few assists. I mean, quite fortunately so. He's overperforming massively on the assist front, but at least he's got that route as well, I suppose. So yeah, it all comes together. 4 million. It just makes a lot of sense as a cheap pickup if you need one. But yeah, again, it's only one if you need the money elsewhere. To be honest, I wouldn't be rushing to rip apart your teams to get him.
Yeah. No. All right. Let's do 1 week punt, and then we can look at the wreckage of this double game week.
Yes, indeed. I think there's an own goal in there.
There is. It's Calafiori. He scored the own goal, apparently. Oh, what a disaster, honestly. I'm pissed off from an FPL and Arsenal perspective here.
Yeah.
Edozi's senior debut.
Oh, wow.
Raya spills across and Wolves punish. Oh. Right, wow. Okay. So yeah, last week. It's hard. I feel like when those people on live TV, something terrible happens in the background. You're like, oh, I've got to keep going. Let's do that very quickly. Madueke, I went for, who's got 11 plus the 2 today, so 13. And you went for Gabriel with the double, with the Joker played.
So what's he on? 7 now? I think assist and
it's 21 point triple captain, Sam. No, we're winning.
Yeah. Not great. So yeah, I played one of my 2 jokers, which for those who don't know means double points in this. It's effectively a captaincy in this game. It's not gone great. And actually, we're coming on to the Gabriel triple captain later on, aren't we? So we'll talk about that in a bit.
Yeah, we'll talk about it in literally a second.
Yeah, cool. I'll leave that for now. So Burnley at home, Cole Palmer. Yeah, all day long, having that.
I've gone for João Pedro just because I'm, it's a very straightforward thing to pick up. Right, let's pick over the wreckage before we go into captaincy of the last one, which is this double game week just gone. Yes. I've been informed on the internet that a Rice captaincy has beaten a Gabriel Tripper captaincy now.
Yes, lovely.
Yeah, it's 11 points for Rice and Gabriel coming away with a measly 7. 21 points. Where do we put that? Do we put it in the pantheon of a Dennis or Duffy? I don't know. Points wise, I mean, obviously those were absolute flipping disasters.
Yeah, it's not context.
No, it's not. But it kind of like there's like an expectation, wasn't there? I mean, I think it's kind of overblown with defenders scoring goals. I think that's kind of worth just saying up front. I think that defenders don't often score goals. It's one of those things that sticks in your mind as a thing which has happened. Especially if you're like me and you've benched the Gabriel goal or this season. It kind of feels like those sort of widely broadcast fixture pair scores where he returns good points basically in every other fixture pair other than this one, Sam, has been the one which has kind of made everyone just think, oh, this is terrible.
Yeah, I mean, it is a shame. Obviously, it's not gone particularly well at all, but 7 points is, I think, 1 point lower than his previous worst pairing for games that he's actually played in this season. Only 1 point worse than that 8. I think he hit 8 points once as a pairing, so it is the worst. Look, it's not great, but at the end of the day, he's picked up an assist, he's picked up DEFCON, and even though they've conceded in both games, he still walked away with 7 points, which I think if you were to go around the community in advance, the expectation was, or the hope was 10 points at a minimum. Like, you probably take 10 points and anything above 15, you're like, yeah, cool. I'll call that a win of some kind. So I think we're about 3 or 4 points off of reasonable, and then another 4 or 5 points away from great. So I think it's a failure, but it's not in the pantheon of like huge historical misses. Like, I've had Mane triple captain 1 point off in the first game injured. Dennis, like, I had Saka last season, who went off injured in the first game from that Leif Davis rake down his calf. So yeah, look, it's not great, but it's far from the worst thing I've ever seen. And I don't want to get massively over passionate about a 7 points when I was hoping for 10 or more. Like it's a bit poor, but it's not season ruining. I've had a bad game week for other reasons, not this one.
This is, of all the things which have meant this is a terrible game week. No, I'm with you. I think that triple captains, we said earlier on, many times throughout the last kind of few years you've been on, Sam, and throughout the last kind of whatever, it has been that the triple captains are the least powerful chip, and it is what it is. I think it's just because it was an event, because it was a defender in the modern era that we'd all triple captains, and we'd all hope that would return more than he has. And yeah, it's not been fantastic. I mean, I'm looking at live FPL now, still ended up at a massive 11 points off the safety score. I think I've ended up kind of like 134k, but that's like 8 points outside the top 100k. So it's not it's pretty bad. I'm not going to lie, but it's not awful. And unfortunately, though, my podcast co-host has told me that this weekend is going to also be an absolute disaster. So yeah, I think kind of we'll pick up the pieces a bit more next week after the impending disaster of this week coming. But yeah, nonetheless, I mean, it's been piss poor. It's been a little while, I think, since I've had double game week, which has really been game changing, Sam. I kind of feel like the double game weeks, we always get very excited. We're always here, but much like my Arsenal team, Arsenal, the club that I support, I'm drinking from the bottle. I'm not actually. I haven't got bottles. I've only got cans. But if I did have a bottle, I'd be drinking from it because it's very sad. I obviously I haven't seen the second half because I've been here. But do I want to watch it and analyze that in micro detail? Probably not. I'll read through.
I'd probably advise not.
Get on with my life.
As a man who's watched a lot of losing performances from my club, you don't want to dwell on that kind of thing. It's not fun.
I feel like like the meme of Mel Gibson talking to the Jesus.
Yes,
when he's covered in blood. I was like, "Oh, Sam, my team is bottled the title." You're like, "I'm a
the title, yeah." That sucks.
Well, okay, it's been bad. At least he got some points. It's fine. It wasn't a Duffy, and he didn't get sent off. It's fine. Yes, Dan in the chat said, "Try Big Brother Rovers fan." Obviously, that's my second.
There's always someone worse off. Always.
Completely appreciate that. It hasn't been fantastic. Let's put it that way. But hey, next Tuesday we'll be here and we'll all be celebrating. No, it sounds like we won't be. Right, captaincy for the week ahead. Sorry, Sam.
Sorry, that was
that way. There we go.
We're both
captaincy for the week ahead, and I think if I own João Pedro, I think I'll be putting on him. I have seen a couple of my FPL.team is telling me to captain Enzo, you idiot. Maybe that's just a reflection of him not scoring points over the last couple of weeks, but I'm just not. Even though the underlying data is good, I'm just not convinced he's a good finisher. I don't know, man. It's just from watching him a little bit this year, a little bit more this year because he's been in my team a couple of times. I just feel like I should, at the moment I'm just bust on Bruno. I just feel like if there's going to be somebody who does points against what's the opposite of homesick, away sick Everton, it just kind of feels like he's going to be the man. Haaland, Newcastle and Eddie Howe have got awful record at the Etihad, and if Pep does say that Erling is okay, guys, he's going to play, then maybe I will change my mind a little bit. But for me, I'm quite happy just with it on Bruno, with Enzo Weiss at the moment. But if I did on João Pedro, I'd be very tempted to stick on João Pedro, to be honest. I'm just so glad that game is a 3 p.m. honestly, as a non-João Pedro owner.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not looking forward to that Chelsea game or the Man City game, to be honest, because I do feel like Semenyo has a good chance of doing well again. My captaincy is on Erling Haaland, and I doubt it will move from him. Newcastle playing in the midweek. I know they've battered Karabag in midweek and looked pretty good for it. But a lot of their players played decent minutes. Man City have a title to go and win. Let's be honest. They're right in it now. They are going to have their tails up. Erling Haaland was pictured in training, proper training today. I'd be shocked if he didn't play. And looking at his non-penalty XGI, it's first by a long margin. Looking at the opponents, XGC, it's pretty poor. So yeah, I mean, I think. Wait, is that the wrong way round? I'm trying to figure that out. 18th, is that good or bad, Tom?
It is. No, I think
That's
maybe
good,
I've screwed that up. Maybe.
Yeah, I was gonna say I read it. I was like that.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
18th. Yeah, right. Okay. So actually, Newcastle are a great defense. I'm going to avoid captaining against them. No, I still like Erling Haaland at home. I think their tails are going to be up. I actually haven't been too displeased with what I've seen of him recently. Obviously, he came off at half time with a little bit of a knock, but clearly rested in the cup. Looks good to go. Bruno's never a bad captaincy option. I do still like him, but I think Erling is probably where I'd place it this week personally. But one player that I would captain over all of these players, if I had him, without a doubt, would be Cole Palmer by a mile. I would have, if I had Cole Palmer, he would undoubtedly be my captain this week over João Pedro, over Bruno, over Haaland by a distance, to be completely honest. Rested, had a good 10-day break on penalties at home to Burnley, who look all at sea at the moment, should have good minutes. I mean, yeah, Cole Palmer all day long if you've got him.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Just 'cause, yeah, penalties is the way.
He's also looking in the groove again a little bit. Like his most recent performance was impressive.
Yeah, no. One of those who have gone there, despite the obvious caveats, have been richly rewarded and fair play, to be honest. Okay, yeah. I think if Haaland is all right, then yeah, I think that might change my mind a little bit. Yeah, especially after tonight's result, I think you've got to kind of factor in that game stay a little bit. And when I first wrote my notes here, I was like, "Oh yeah, no, I'm fine with Bruno against Everton." But yeah, maybe a little bit of Erlinging might be a good thing. Right, on to our teams for the week ahead then, and I think that it's you first.
Yeah, I'll go first. So I'll read it out quickly and then I'll explain what my transfer plans are. Kelleher in goal at home to Brighton. Finally, Brentford are coming into those good fixtures. And actually, I think Kelleher is probably one of, if not the best keeper to own for the next 5 until I wildcard. So hopefully it actually pays off. I've got double Arsenal defence, which looks shoddy all of a sudden. Gabriel and Timber both away at Spurs. Munoz at home to Wolves. I'm really crossing my fingers that pays off because I really need a quite immediate payout from him to make that transfer worthwhile. In my midfield, it's Bruno Fernandes with the vice captaincy. Enzo Fernandez gets one more week at home to Burnley. Good data recently. So yeah, hopefully he puts his shooting boots on for once and can start converting. Declan Rice is the player I would be potentially looking at transferring out. We'll come into that in a minute. Or one of the two players I would potentially look at. But assist today and DEFCON twice in a row. Is he a bad player to hold on to for a little while longer whilst I make my mind up on the replacement? Arguably not. Rodgers at home to Leeds, no question there. And then I've currently got starting Elliot Anderson at home to Liverpool. That's 4 points. Basically take it to the bank. And who knows what they're going to be like under Pereira. Maybe he'll play more advanced. That would be fun. He's certainly got the talent to play further up the pitch, but anyway, up front, Erling Haaland, captain at home to Newcastle, and Thiago at home to Brighton. I'm hoping that I can spike a haul out of Thiago before the ownership rises back up to 80%, because it will probably by next week. And I think this is the last week where I expect it to stay maybe around 30-ish%. So a haul would be quite powerful there. On my bench, I've got the other Anderson away at Sunderland, and then I've got Alderete at home to Fulham, both of which are decent enough picks. Arguably could play either of them ahead of Elliot Anderson, but I think just that certainty of DEFCON with Elliot Anderson puts him slightly ahead of those two. if I was to use a transfer, and I've only got one in the bank, but I do have 2.8 million to spend, it would probably be Rice up to Verts, but I'm not sure it's worth like making this week considering the fixtures that they've got. And then the other option is maybe Anderson across or up to one of the cheaper midfielders we spoke about, like Dango, like Ryan, like Harry Wilson, for instance. But again, I don't think any of them have such good fixtures this week that it's worth doing now. And Elliot Anderson, if he gets 4 points, I need that player to return to make it worthwhile. So, actually, before I move on, the other thing that's probably important to note with Elliot Anderson is, as much as I'd like to transfer him between now and game week 31 and attack someone who's going to haul in that position, and I think there are many that could, every extra transfer I use on a player that doesn't blank now means that I have 0 spare transfers to mitigate for injury, suspension, anything like that by the time we get to game week 31. So if anything went wrong and I used a transfer on Anderson over a transfer on a player that will blank, I could have nothing other than taking a hit as an option or playing with 10 come game week 31. So considering he's just going to tick along with 4 or 5 points every week, I think he probably just stays until I wildcard now.
Yeah, no, fair. I think he was always going to be, since the start of the season, he was signposted as a player just to kind of hold on to for a long time. And as you say, kind of allude to, the floor is just so good that, well, yeah, why not? Why not just leave him there? And as it is, the team that you've got is absolutely fine, and the value over replacing a player for you is just clear that you just leave it as it is. I think there's definitely there's definitely no sort of other option, and it's the same for me. Where okay, I'm happy with the 3-4-3. Got the boss on Bruno at the moment, but yeah, take on board again what you said. You're a wise man, Sam. Have I ever told you that? You're a very, very wise man.
Wish my rank would reflect
that. yeah. Well, yeah. If idiots like me can do all right, although this week's not been great, but if idiots like me can do all right, then I'm sure that we're in for a Sam supremacy in not very long. But yeah, I think the captaincy probably is going to move to Haaland. But this week's a good week because I've got no 50-50, which is going to be a problem for me. And at the back, Raya in goal, yeah, whatever. God, he's got this kind of a very, very kind of spaghetti-ish hair at the moment. I'm not sure about that. At the back, Munoz home to Wolves, looking forward to the 65th minute sub after conceding 2 again. But hey, it is what it is. He's there for the next 5. Chalobah, his final game for me, but I think he's probably going to stick around. Actually, I think he's going to be part of the defensive rotation for a little bit because Gabriel, Rogers, they're going to stick around. Bruno's going to stick around. That Enzo and Rice midfield duo, I think those two are going to be the ones that I move out, and I think that Dango is going to be one who's going to come in, or maybe Ryan. I'm not sure which one, and it's just kind of whether what I can afford. If I'm looking at Verts, then maybe. I've got to go a bit cheaper and maybe look at Ryan. I'm not sure if I can actually afford that now. We'll see. But Semenyo, I think, probably is one that I'm looking at kind of picking up because my rank is still fairly decent. And as I said earlier on, I think the downside is not going to, the upside, sorry, is not going to get too limited because I think a lot of people are going to be looking at Semenyo and thinking, well, the blank's coming, I'm not buying him. So I'm hoping that will work in my favour. Up front, Thiago, Haaland, Nekatike aren't going anywhere for me for the extent of before our wild card. So yeah, in the 3-4-3, Anderson first sub away at Sunderland. I'm sure. Let's just leave it there. So this week I think I'll be kind of maybe preoccupying myself with which one I'm going to captain out of Haaland or Bruno, but I think you're probably right. Actually, from hearing what you've said, especially taking into account what's happened tonight, that captain the Man City player is probably a good thing. And I'm very scared of the Semenyo owners because that's going to be pretty. That could be one of those games where they really make a statement this weekend. That's for sure. But yeah, glad there's no 50-50 to worry about. Definitely rolling. I'm at 0.0 in the bank. But yeah, next week I think there's definitely a lot of impact to be made. with those two midfielders, which I'll talk a bit more about next week.
Yeah, I mean, I always like saying in FPL, it's not about who you don't own, but it is about who you do. And I like your team a lot. I actually quite like my team objectively this week, player for player. But 27 itself, there are 2 or 3 players very specifically that we don't own that I am petrified of what they could do to us, because I like the matchups. And yeah, I'm just a bit scared how punishing they could be if 1 or 2 of them blank. Those 3 players being João Pedro, Palmer, and Semenyo, by the way, and maybe even Man City defense, arguably, like Gahey as well. It needs to factor into my thinking there as well. Like, those are the players that, I mean, we don't own. Obviously, a lot of managers do. I think they're the ones that I'm most scared of. And whilst I like the look of our teams this week, it could all pan out well. But if you've got like 20 or 30 effective points against you in those positions, it's quite hard to get a green arrow. So that's why I'm scared of this week. It's not because I don't like our teams. It's because there are specific players that we just won't own this week that could do a lot of damage. So yeah, very jealous. I'm also jealous of Ekatike in your team as well, for what it's worth. Yeah, we'll see. And Nobby in the chat says, if João Pedro, Palmer, and Semenyo all blank, the drinks are on him. I will take you up on that offer. I'd be very glad to meet you at the bar if that happens. And I might get around in myself.
Yep. All right. Fair enough. All right. I think that's everything, isn't it?
That's everything. We've done it in record time. Maybe it's because we're miserable because of the Arsenal clean sheet wipeout, but I think we got through it all quite efficiently today. Anyway, thank you all so much, as always, for listening, especially if you were listening and watching along whilst the Arsenal game was going on in the background. Hopefully that was an enjoyable experience for you, especially if you didn't triple captain Gabriel, I suppose. We were Who Got the Assist. You can find us on Blue Sky at Who Got the Assist, all written out one word. FPL Pricey on there for me. X, it's WGTA_FPL. Again, I'm just FPL Pricey on there. And on YouTube, it's Who Got the Assist, all written out again. And again, I'm on there at FPL Pricey as well. And if you did enjoy the pod, we'd really appreciate it if you could make sure you follow us on the social channels. Give the pod a 5-star rating wherever you're listening. And of course, if you're watching, leave a like, hit subscribe if you're new around here as well. And yeah, all of those things really do help us out. So thank you very much in advance.
Yep, thank you very much, everybody. Next time's back to normal scheduling, albeit just for one more week. It's yet another midweek of games coming, game 29. So yeah, I think it will be next Tuesday and then next Sunday, and then a week off, and then the Tuesday, kind of the week after that. I'm actually off to see Peppa Pig live that week after
Are you going
Sunday.
to Peppa Pig World?
No, not Peppa Pig World. It's in Butland, Sam. Even more, even more glamorous. I cannot wait for that.
I used to live very close to Peppa Pig World. That's all.
Yeah, I know, man. I know. I've been to Portland's Park. It's the best theme park in the UK. I'm going to say that now. But anyway, that is not for us to discuss here. But yeah, take up with the fixture computer in the FA Cup that we can't be as regular as we'd like. But yeah, we'll see you next Tuesday. Hope we assist you, and yeah, see you then.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?